Welcome back, metalheads. Today, I'm spinning the wax with Kathrine Shepard of Sylvaine, and we're listening to Depeche Mode's Violator. Don't go anywhere. It all starts right now. Hello and welcome back to Spinning the Wax, where we listen to your favorite artists' favorite records. My name is John Garcia, your friendly neighborhood headbanger. Today, I am so happy to welcome Kathrine Shepard to the show to listen to some good old-fashioned English synth pop. Kathrine is a talented multi-instrumentalist from Norway, whom you may know best from her blackened, folk gaze, ambient post-metal project, Sylvaine. She wears her heart on her sleeve, both in her music and in real life, and we have a wonderful, deep conversation that spans the gamut of everything that we usually talk about on this show. This is one of those interviews where we lose ourselves in the yapping and the music, and probably could have kept going for hours if left unchecked. For the episode today, she brings on Depeche Mode's Violator, the incredible 7th album from the 2020 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. Kathrine discusses how important this band has been to her, both through her personal musical and spiritual quests, and also how recording a cover of Enjoy the Silence at music school led to the creation of her first album and thus the start of Sylvaine. She also discusses 3 big things that she's taken away from this band specifically as a songwriter, how insane it is that Depeche Mode had 6 albums already before this one exploded, and the simple yet genius ways that they ensnare the listener with a little bit of melody while layering plenty of ear candies around them. We also get into some real talk about Kathrine's ability to explore her artistic expression with an EP like Er Framand, where she temporarily abandoned her extreme music style for the ancient and spellbinding sounds of her native Norway. Combining interpretations of traditional Norwegian folk songs along with her own compositions and an accompanying fairy tale, Kathrine reached into the very depths of her and her country's soul to musically recharge herself after the draining, exhausting, yet rewarding experience of recording her 4th record, Nova. The fact that she was able to follow this detour while getting encouragement from her fans is huge, and it's been just another step in the journey of discovering herself and Sylvaine. And finally, we spent some time chatting about her first show of 2025, as this episode was recorded just a couple of days before her performance with Jo Quail at a beautiful concert hall in Antwerp, Belgium. We stay in that pre-show state of mind for just a bit as she gathers her thoughts about her stripped-down, amplified solo sets and mentally prepares for not only the upcoming show she's about to do, but the upcoming tour with Ardor across North America as well. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we enjoyed having it. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you do, and please consider becoming a Patreon member as well, where you can get early access to these episodes, weekly new music updates, and unedited versions of the show where you can sync the album to listen to along with us. That can be seen at patreon.com/spinningthewax. All right, without further ado, this is episode 16 of Spinning the Wax, where Kathrine Shepard listens to Depeche Mode. Please welcome Kathrine Shepard to Spinning the Wax. Kathrine, it is so good to have you. How are you doing on this frigid morning, this frigid day?
Well, thank you so much for having me, John. It's like a big pleasure to be here. Always fun to talk about other people's music and
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
interviews. So that's great. So thank you for having me. I'm fine, basically. I kind of got like catapulted into 2025, and I've been kind of working nonstop with pre-production and getting ready for upcoming tours and stuff since
Mm-hmm.
the 2nd of January. So I'm a bit like in this very ungrounded state, but I'm good. I'm excited for everything that's happening. First show coming up this weekend. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of stuff going on, basically.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that probably closer to the end of the show, just because, like, obviously you're in this like period of time that isn't going to exist for very much longer, which is right before this really cool show with Jo Quail. But so I want to ask you your thoughts about that a little bit later. So and maybe we can look back on this as like a little time capsule of like, this is what Kathrine was like 3 days before the show happened. So she's like, oh, please don't know. It's too much. Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to have you on and talk Depeche Mode with you. But also I wanted to say that, so I don't know if you remember, but we briefly met before in Denver when I saw you with Imperial, Triumphant, and Zeal and Ardor, which was just an incredible tour all the way around. I've talked to Manuel since then, and he was talking about how it felt like every band was on like a little black metal lily pad. You know, they had one foot on the black metal lily pad, and then everything else was somewhere else. But there was something, there was a little bit of a draw to get like that black metal draw through all those bands, but every single band was something completely different that had something for everyone or for nobody or like to introduce people. So just real quick, how I know that you're gearing up for another tour with Ivor in just a couple weeks in the States, but how was that run? I know that, Sylvaine is no stranger to the States, and you did a run with Amorphous and Hoaxed a couple years before that. But that was such a great show. The theater in Denver was absolutely incredible, and it sounded amazing. So how was that tour, and what have you been up to since then?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I think that's one of the most favorite tours we've ever been on. It's always a bit specific, because obviously Zeal and Ardor and us, we're both from Europe, so we kind of are used to the way of touring over in Europe. I mean, so are Imperial, Triumphant, because they've been touring here a lot as well. But my point is that when you're in the US, usually you tour kind of separate. Like you have everyone kind of travel separate and stuff like that. So it can be harder to get that feeling of like being a full unit with everyone involved. But I remember it was so easy to connect with the Zeal and Ardor guys, and we were very. I remember getting the offer for this tour on the Amorphous tour a few months earlier. We were like going towards the end of the Amorphous tour, and I got this email, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, we're getting another offer to come back in a few months." And it was Zeal and Ardor, and I loved Zeal and Ardor. I still love them very much.
Yeah.
Contemplated talking about one of their records today, I have to say.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Someone is going to one of these days, I think, and I will be excited to dive into it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a must. Like they did just, I mean, Manuel is a freaking genius. So that tour was absolutely amazing. I was super excited. It was one of those tours where it was really fun to actually watch the band you're on tour with every single night. Because let's be honest, even if it's your favorite band, when you watch them like 20 nights in a row, at some point you're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But I loved this because they were touring the record Zeal and Ardor, and that album is just like absolutely mind-blowing. So I really, really loved that tour. Everyone got along so nicely. And I mean, the Imperial Triumphant guys are lovely as well. I got to do like a featuring with them in Portland. That was so fun. Unleash my inner demon.
Oh yeah.
I scared my band. Like they were like, "Who was that on stage?"
That's incredible.
That was really fun. But like they asked me the day of the show, and they were like, "Yeah, you can just jump in here." I'm like, "Yeah, because your songs are so easy to follow structure-wise."
Yeah, they probably had the sheet music ready for you.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. You're just like, "What is this?" So I was kind of like, "I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll just gotta give it a go and like try," because it's kind of fun. Like I really love to do things kind of like last minute, just jump in and improvise. No, so that tour was really great. Like, we really enjoyed it. The first one we did with Amorphous, we did like the full tour of the States and up into Canada. Like, it was a lot to do in a month or like 5 weeks. Whereas that one was, we went from one coast over to the other, so it was a little bit easier travel-wise. And it just, I don't know, it was really a lovely tour. And we often talk about it with my bandmates, like Max and Flo and Dorian, my live guys, and like, just like go down memory lane and you go, oh, what, those times were so nice. so yeah, love that tour. And since then, basically, that's 2022. I've just been like, not last year, 2023. Still have to switch my brain into 2025.
Yeah, exactly. Last year was 2022, right?
Right, exactly. It was like 2019, right? No, we're getting old. That's the only thing.
Yeah, trust me. Yeah, I know.
So 2023 was supposed to be a calmer year where I was like focusing on recording my EP, which is something that kind of came out of the blue. It wasn't supposed to be something that was happening, but it just kind of, I just embraced the moment and it was something that felt right. So I made that happen. But in the end, I ended up like traveling a lot that year and going to like places, and I started to get involved in like doing panels and doing like non-concert, like, partaking in different festivals and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So since 2022, I've been doing a lot of that, doing still a lot of shows. I recorded my EP last year in 2024. I released my EP that was dedicated to Norwegian folk music, my version of
Hmm.
it, and just been like doing little shows here and there with my live band, and also now kind of launched my solo thing where I go out and I have a very like intimate, stripped down set. That's for me is like it's much more scary to do in a sense because I'm so undressed and so naked,
Mm.
but it's very rewarding emotionally because I can feel that the connection with the audience is more direct, and like the kind of the veil between on stage off stage is way thinner, like it's way more blurred, the roles are way more blurred, so it's like a very interesting way to perform. So a lot of stuff has happened since that
Yeah,
tour.
seriously. Yeah, no, I was like, as soon as I said it, I was like, what? Obviously, the EP and stuff like that came out, which I have to say, I love that you as an artist are able to do stuff like that. Just like, you have your heavy stuff, and obviously, folk music and Norwegian folk music is intertwined throughout Sylvaine's music, from the very beginning. But just to be like inspired enough, or just have the freedom enough to just or the audience even just to like, hey, I'm gonna do this thing. You can listen
Yeah.
to it, you can not listen to it, but this is gonna be a part of me. And I listen to it when I read a lot. Actually, like I'll put it in the background because like I can't understand I don't know what the lyrics are saying or
Of course
anything
not.
like that to begin with. There, but it's just like a nice kind of soothing background thing to put on. I like to put on like a little bit of like ambient stuff if I'm reading and stuff like that. And but I love what you said about the stripped down versions, talking about the veil between the audience and the artist is thinner a little bit. Nice like mystical thought about that, and I want to ask you a little bit about that in a little bit because yeah, I just think that the arrangements for the songs, even with distorted guitars and stuff like that, really lend themselves, just in my mind, to something that could be done on stage with just yourself. And I'm curious how you're finding that process, but that'll be a little bit later because we've got some music to talk about,
More
Kathrine.
importantly,
Yes, exactly. So we are going to be doing a nice little bop to Depeche Mode's Violator album, and I'm excited to dig into this because for me, Depeche Mode is not a band that I've had historically a lot of experience with, but over the past few years, as I've been listening to more bands that have included a lot more like goth or new wave or electronic and stuff like that, and especially in the metal sphere over the last few years, finding those bands like Joy Division and The Cure and Depeche Mode and all of those kind of like new wave, post punk, electronic, whatever you want to call it, type of bands has been a lot of fun. So I've gone through, I think, the important albums in Depeche Mode's discography, but other than that, you're like, I really don't know much about this band other than how influential and stuff that they are. So let's just first, Kathrine, why did you decide to settle with Violator by Depeche Mode? Although I guess technically I decided for you, but that was one of the choices that you put in front of me.
yeah, because as we already talked about before this started, like it's just too hard to make choices in life, because that's
Yes.
a part of adulting I don't like. So basically, it was a very hard choice to narrow it down even to two different albums. I just kind of went like what first came to mind, and one of the first albums that came to mind was Violator because it's hard for me to choose in Depeche Mode's discography actually
Mm,
which song I want, every song, which album I want to talk about because I think they released a lot of good records. Maybe not the most recent ones, I will say,
yeah.
but like in the 80s, 90s, they had a lot of cool stuff coming out. But Violator is a classic. It's
Hmm.
been on like, how many different lists of the best album of all time, like it's been amongst so many other like more mainstream records. So it just felt like a nice way to start, and like I think most people have heard some of the tracks on this record. So if people don't know necessarily about Depeche Mode, I think it could be a nice gateway into their catalog. Also, a nice gateway into the whole like synth pop, new wave, gothic, whatever something thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly, yeah.
and I absolutely just love this record. I love so many things about this record, which we're going to get into. But so yeah, I just felt like that would be a really cool one to talk about. So thank you for choosing it.
Yeah, you are very welcome. Yeah, I for a while the first and like really only Depeche Mode album that I listened to was Black Celebration, which is
Yeah,
also like fucking phenomenal. But
yeah,
this one, the flow of this album in particular is just so incredible with like every song that is after the song is it like exactly the type of vibe that it needs to be to kind of like switch it up or something like that. For I guess for those, and this might be a band that I imagine that some of this audience is going to be extremely familiar with just because of how big they are, and some probably are like me that you've either only heard one album or no albums by them. What would so you mentioned that this album would be a good like gateway into this band? How would you describe Depeche Mode, and what should people expect when they're like going in to listen to this band?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like they have a sort of core sound that you can find throughout the releases. I find, anyways.
Mm,
But like this record in particular has one thing that I think. I mean, no, there are other albums that have that as well, but I know that this one, I think that also like the guys in Depeche Mode were going for that kind of like slightly sexy vibe,
mm,
kind of more sensual, like playing a little bit with those sexual tension and the whole thing, which makes it that kind of very sensual, like seductive kind of darker synth pop. So what is typical for Depeche Mode is like you have lots of interesting arrangements and layerings, like with synthesizers and different kinds of sounds. It's usually on the catchy side, but it also has this kind of like what can I say? Not maybe not avant-garde isn't the right word, but it has something a little bit different from like a let's say a regular pop band. It
mm-hmm.
has a strong personality, which I think comes from probably like Martin Gore and like the Flood that has been producing some of the records, including
Mm-hmm.
this one. So yeah, it's basically a pop band, but it has that synth. It's very heavily synth based. It has a lot of cool rhythmic elements. It has a lot of cool melodies, which is very important to me. I'm very attracted to melodies and melodic parts as a listener. Um, so yeah, I would just say it's something that you would expect would be coming out of Britain in the 1980s. After the whole like post-punk new wave era. It's like kind of the tail end of that, and kind of taking it into something that's even maybe a bit more on the what can you say, not commercial, but more available for everyone side. I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an amazing way to put it, and you're right. I mean, songs like "Blue Dress," "World in My Eyes," "Policy of Truth," like that sensual, sexual tension that you're talking about in all of those songs that just makes them, I don't know, almost like there's a bit of a sinister vibe throughout this album too. That is not
That's it.
like
Yeah.
like there it's there, but it's not like overt in it. It's just like as you get into these kind of like trippy melodies that are in there, but then they might harmonize something in a way that's just off, off the key that they're singing just a little bit to make you think like, oh, wait a second. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to dig into that because I even said that there's like you mentioned the like the low end, like the rhythm. There's some songs in here that almost remind me of like Dirty Black Summer by Danzig, that kind of like sleazy lurching rhythm that's really cool. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about with this album specifically. But if you're ready to crack into this album, I'm ready to do it.
I think we should have hit it. Like one of my favorite songs on this record is the first one. So
It's so
let's.
good. I can't believe they released there's a fourth single on this. And it's just like
Well, I
that
know,
should
right?
have been number one. Like, come on.
Crazy. I thought about that too. Like when I was like looking into like when the different singles were released, I'm like, are you? I mean, okay, Personal Jesus. It's a massive like. It's like such an iconic song. So fair enough that that was the first single. Very
Yeah.
smart. They also had this thing, by the way, with the release of that one. If I'm not wrong, I think they actually did like a new kind of album campaign thing where they actually had a phone number where you could call in and you could hear the whole song.
Oh shit.
Like you call the number and then
Yeah.
when it connected, there would be the song playing, and it just like drove the song into like crazy charts and everything for them. So I mean, it's definitely a great song. But I just yeah, World in My how is World in My Eyes like the fourth single? It tells you about how many good songs are on this record.
Yeah, it's one of those albums that I get through and it's like, yeah, World in My Eyes, that's my favorite song. Sweetest Perfection, yeah, that's my favorite song.
Yeah,
Halo,
exactly.
yeah, that's my favorite. It's just like you get through and it's like you can't pick. It's like
Oh
whatever
my
was the
god.
last one I listened to. That's my
Yeah,
favorite song off this record.
exactly. That's a good place to be in.
Yeah. Okay, ready? World in My Eyes, Depeche Mode, Violator. Three, two, one, play. Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool already. Like the synth bass.
And so I didn't realize that this album was 1990. I don't know. It's one of those things that it does sound of its time, but yet it's also so timeless that it makes just as much sense in 2025 as it does when it came out. I mean, with this, what, 35 years later almost?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Exactly. That's it. It's like it's one of those things that just has the ability to be relevant, even if it's that many decades later. And it just, again, it kind of talks about like the sound that they've created and how I don't know how characteristic it is for them, but still so universal that people can connect to it over different, like, basically generations
Yeah,
of.
exactly.
It's very cool. Well, this synth part is so cool. And it's, when you listen to the arrangements here, it's pretty sparse. It's not that many things going on, really. There's some tracks, but then you have little things that kind of pop up here and there, come and go, and it just makes everything. And they're masters at that, like arrangements.
I am so glad that you brought that up because I was trying not to interrupt you when you were like talking about what to expect with this band, because that's one of the things I've noticed a lot going through their discography recently, is that, and especially on this album, exactly what you said, there might be one main theme that is like just a couple of bars and
Yeah.
that's it, but they add to it, they add underlayers to it, they harmonize over it. It's like those layers that you were talking about. And I mean, I think Policy of Truth is the same way, right? And
Yeah.
like Enjoy the Silence, that chorus line is going to be stuck in my all I ever wanted, it's just going to be stuck in my head forever. And it's just, that's, I know that there are a lot of bands both in metal and everywhere else nowadays that are like, we gotta show off and do all this technicality, we gotta do this to be impressive, to get people our eyes on. But just like writing just a simple line, like a simple melody, and making that a song is so fucking hard. Like if it were easy, anybody could do it, right? But just, and yet here are 9 songs basically all made just like that. It's crazy.
That's it. That's why I tend to gravitate towards 80s pop music quite a lot, because I feel that decade was filled with people that were really good at the melodic game.
Yes,
And
and
that's
as
also
you're
why.
saying this line right here, that's kind of like that sinister
Yeah,
undertone right
exactly. They're
here.
kind of like, you're being followed in the dark, walking home or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just the sense of melody and like the sense of, there's a time and place for everything. And again, like Mark Ellis and Martin Gore, like, the producer, and also Martin Gore playing in the band, of course. I feel like they really just have such a good and keen sense of when things need to happen to move just enough to make like the whole piece work together. It's
Hmm.
just really fascinating to me. Like also like the sound, the choices of the sounds that are being brought in, but like it's just rather on the simplistic side, or it sounds simplistic. Maybe it isn't, but it like
Yeah,
as a listener, you get the sense that it's quite minimalistic.
sure.
But like things come and go exactly when they need to appear, and they're just here at the moment to be like, oh, wait a second, and then they're gone. And I don't know, it's just like so cool. Like I love that about this band. They're
Yeah,
really good.
it's so perfect. And then this one also, that there is that seductiveness in it too, where it's like maybe it's not like ripping everybody's clothes off in the heat of passion right now, but it is like in the you're looking for people on the dance floor type of thing, and kind of like undulating
Absolutely.
in a way to get people to gravitate towards you type
Yes,
of deal,
100%.
Yeah.
You're just like coming up to someone and just being like, hey. And
Yep.
from there, the song is like, and I believe like reading about this song, I believe that was the vibe they were going for too, because I think they kind of embraced the whole like sexual, sensual side of this record and wanted it to be like seductive, but at the same time, as you say, a bit menacing. Like,
Yeah.
is it seduction, or is it kind of like, the sketchy person you wanted to really stay away from at the club?
Yeah, and I think that was, someone more versed in like electronic and like 80s and English goth music or anything like that can correct me, but I believe that was also part of like the idea with the music then, is to be like, you didn't want people sitting around or like sitting at the tables when your music is playing on at the club. You want them on the floor and like engaging with it, and that's what, Sisters of Mercy and Susie and these bands tried to do, to get people to get out and move and not just be like stuck in their way or whatever.
Exactly. It's like the opposite of like maybe Doom or something like that, where it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
about just getting into this like state and kind of an introvert thing.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, look at a band like Joy Division, like the lyrics that are so dark and so like, oh my goodness, the poor guy that is going through this. It's quite
Seriously.
introspect in a way, but like the music is so open and so like inviting and uplifting and everything. And I really think it's interesting with the British scene, basically from the whole post punk era with like Joy Division and these bands, into all the way up to Britpop. Actually, nowadays, or like like
Yeah.
15 decades ago, where they have this kind of like interesting duality between that kind of introvert and extrovert side. Because as you said, It can be bands that are kind of, they don't, I mean, the message could be a bit more on the serious side, yet we want everyone to get up and move to this and create something together, which is very explorational.
Yeah, and nowadays, I'm sure you're very familiar with them, but like a band like Grave Pleasures obviously will be the
That's
first one, you know, on the
yeah,
tip of people's tongues using that type of vibe in this where, you know, their lyrics are very post-apocalyptic and everything is bad and we're all going to blow up in a ball of fire, but hey, let's at least dance a little bit while we're going out or something, you know?
let's go out with a bang, let's burn together.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's, I mean, a lot of the bands that have inspired me for my music are from this British scene. You know, like if it's from the new wave or post punk, if it's from the kind of dark wave or the dream pop era, like the Cocteau Twins and all those bands,
Yeah.
or you know, up until like more synth pop stuff, like Depeche Mode, for example, shoegaze, of course. There's so many good things that came out of this little island,
Right?
and has a very specific sound. I think it's always a bit lush sounding throughout. I mean, no matter the genre. Like I feel in that time frame between the 70s and 90s, it's a very like lush thing going on in the music from this place.
And so you touched on something that I wanted to ask about, specifically in regards to your songwriting and stuff like that. Obviously, I know that you've been into music since a pretty young age, and I believe your father, at least your parents, were musicians as well.
That's right. Yeah, my dad was a professional drummer for like 30 years or so, 35
Oh,
years, something like
amazing.
that. Doing the nightclub circus in the States because obviously he's Californian, so he
Yeah.
did that for a long time, and then also toured overseas. And my mom was working in the like labels and like on the other side on the business, basically.
I want to dig into that in a little bit, but I'm curious as far as just specifically with Depeche Mode, because obviously you mentioned so many different types of influences for you across this genre and stuff like that. But I'm curious, kind of like what did Depeche Mode teach you specifically about songwriting, like subconsciously or consciously, as far as like what you try and take from the songs that you like about them to inject into your, you know, music and the way you arrange your songs.
That's a good question. I think, as I've already like mentioned a little bit, is I really admire their sense of melody.
Mm,
Melody is kind of like the key component for me in music. Like, I mean, sometimes it's kind of funny to say that because I also like stuff that's completely ambient. It's not really about melody; it's more about atmosphere.
yeah.
But in general, the stuff that touches me doesn't matter any genre. Actually, I'm not that into genres. It doesn't really matter for me. But the melody, like a catchy melody, like you know, emotive and melody, it could be in synth, it can be guitar, it could be lead vocals, whatever.
Mm.
Um, reach out and touch faith. Woo!
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go. um, Melody is really, really important to me. Like, so I really admire their ability to create hooks, basically. And it's not just, again, like in Dave's singing, it's also in like the synth parts that Martin
Hmm.
write, or like guitar riffs or stuff like that. That you can go listen to like this one. You can listen to Personal Jesus, and you can sing like different parts of the arrangements because they are really good at writing catchy melodies. So this is something I think a lot of people that are into that aspire to be able to do in their own music. I
Hmm.
also there's maybe like three main things. There's a melodic quality that I really really enjoy. Second thing is the layering and the arrangements, as I mentioned, because I think it's so elegantly done and it's so like musically it makes so much sense, and it's like I don't know, it's like the complete like perfect showing of how to do that in a good way, how to bring out certain elements for certain parts, and how that emotional quality, what does that give to this certain time in the music and all this kind of stuff. They're really good with arrangements, and I really, as a person that loves to use layering in my music, if that's
Yeah.
something that has inspired me a lot, you know, like okay, we're gonna bring this thing here, bring that there, put this here. This might sound better in guitar, like all this kind of stuff, like just yeah, arrangements, layering, like the composition, like that. And the third thing would be the production, the choices of sound, because I think that the sound they have is very interesting. Because as we already said, it is very 80s. Like you know the
Hmm.
synth, the choices of the synth sounds, for example, it sounds very 80s. Yet like some of the percussive elements and stuff also sound a bit 80s, but they also sound very modern.
Hmm.
And you have this overall like lushness, and it just creates this really specific universe that's very dreamy but at the same time very direct. So it's like this interesting duality between having this floating thing but at the same time being like, as you said, communicating directly to listeners that I want you to move, while listening to
Yeah.
this. It's just like I feel like their whole thing is just very fascinating, and that's why they've been a band for so long and have been able to tour the world for so long, because what they do is timeless and what they do
Yeah.
is like master craftsmanship. So the songwriting is really, really good. The arrangements is really good. The production, the sound choices, sound landscapes, really interesting, and the melodies are fucking kick-ass. Yeah.
Done. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Done.
Thank you.
Mic drop.
Thank you, Depeche Mode, for
Leaving.
teaching Kathrine how to write songs, because now the rest of the world benefits. But exactly to your point, right? You have this kind of like this, this walking bass line or whatever, that this like almost like steady rhythm that goes through with this one. And it's simple, and that's basically there. But then, like you said, there's things coming and going to where the song is pretty long, or it feels longer than it actually is, because of they just like let that do the talking for a little bit, and they just like, there we go, we're gonna just stay in this pocket, which is bands that do that. Like Black Sabbath was really big at doing this. Like they find a riff or a groove, and they'll just sit in that one for a little bit, and maybe Bill Ward changes up the drums a little bit, but they'll just sit in that groove. And when the band is going, you can just like, it doesn't matter how long the riff is, you could just sit there for it. And this song does that to a T as well.
That's very true. Like, I love that. Like, I'm a very big fan of minimalism in music. Like, also the actual style, classical style minimalism with like Philip Glass and Max Richter and all these composers. Where you take, like, when you get into something, you kind of stay there for a while, establish it, you let it evolve, but like slowly over time, so the listener get into this kind of meditative states. Which is probably why I also like Doom, as I mentioned earlier, and the other record we were talking about that we don't listen to today, basically has a quality of like really getting you into trance. But I feel like you said this song specifically does that as well. Personal Jesus has this like very meditative thing, because it's like the rhythmic and the bass part, as you said, is very much like walking throughout the whole song. It drives it, but carefully, not like aggressively, just kind of lays there, and like all these things happening on top, like coming and going.
And
Yeah,
you'll forget about the beat for a little bit, because other stuff will be going, but it's still there,
exactly.
and then it'll fade. It never changes volume, right? But
No,
your
just
presence, or like, yeah, its presence in your mind kind of like goes and moves back, which is like getting something stagnant to kind of go to the forefront and fall in the background without it's like, again, like, how the fuck do you even do that?
exactly. That's like, yeah, that's really. I mean, we have to remember this is like, what is it? How many records were they in with this one?
This is their seventh record, Kathrine.
Exactly.
Their seventh record.
Yeah, that's crazy. Think about that. You make like your masterpiece at record number 7. Hey, that gives people like me hope. I'm on album number 5 now. I still have time to do something like exceptional. So, let's see what happens. Album
You're
number
5
7.
albums up on me, Kathrine, so you're doing quite well.
Thank you. But yeah, the fact that they've done this like 7 albums in, of course they've already had the time to develop this kind of like mastery of the skill of songwriting and sound production. So I mean, they've established that. I mean, even the album before, Songs for the Masses, which is also another amazing record.
It is, yes.
Already had like loads of this same things that we hear on Violator. But the thing that I think is specific with Violator, at least for me as a listener, or maybe up until that point at least, something that separates it from what came before, is that kind of dark elegance that I find in this record.
Yeah.
It's very like smooth in a way that is not maybe exactly the same on the ones that came before it. So yeah, they really upped the game at record 7.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think too, because they were already like well known and like a big commodity at this point, right? And but yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy to think. Like I was thinking about that. I was listening to like, Black Celebration and everything like that. Just like those records are already fucking phenomenal, and yet that's not even the like feather in their cap in their discography. So
that's it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say that that's the norm. I would say that they are exceptionally talented and good at what they do. Also, I don't know if you've ever seen them live, but on stage, I mean, I haven't seen them live, obviously, in the 80s. Wasn't born then, so, sorry.
we gotta wait till that time machine gets invented, and then we can go back and
I
watch
know,
them.
right? Oh, there's so many bands. I'm going to go back and watch Typo Negative. That will be my first thing to do.
There you go.
But yeah, that would be lovely to see them in the 80s. But I did see them in 2023, actually, because I worked with them, because I work for Live Nation freelance sometimes here in Norway, and dressing room coordination and catering, stuff like that. and I got to work Depeche Mode finally after so many years of it didn't work out, and I got to see them. And they are a fantastic live band too. Like I
Amazing.
really think so. Like Dave is a very good frontman. Like he has a very strong charisma. His voice is still good after all these years. So I mean, I think they deserve to have the space they hold in the music business. You know,
Yeah.
they're here for a reason. They are talented both in studio and live. So
Um, yeah, sorry, I was going to say something, but this harmony that they layer in, the harmony that they layer in over this one is incredible. It's in the left channel too. It's only in the left channel.
oh, I only have a left, so I'm just
Yeah,
grabbing that one.
yeah, there you go.
Perfect. Chose the right one.
Yeah. But Jesus and Mary Chain was another one. We were talking about Roadburn. You know, they headlined Roadburn this past year, and
Right.
it's not a band that I spent a lot of time with, but man, they sounded fucking good in that arena over there. Or it's like no time had passed or anything like that. Or again, I'm not super crazy familiar with their music other than the kind of big hits and the big albums and everything like that I listened to before going to Roadburn. But I'm glad to hear that Depeche Mode in 2023 or whatever it was it still sounds good.
I think so, at least. Like, I mean, as you said, there's variables, and obviously, let's just be honest. When we get older, maybe those kind of like, it's more of a day by day thing. Sometimes you don't have great days, and it's
Of
just like it's
course.
the most human thing ever. You just have to accept it, even if it's really hard to accept. I think Oslo, the show they did here in Oslo, was very, very good, and I was just like, it was one of those concert moments where I remember standing there doing "Enjoy the Silence" and just being like, "Oh, I want it!" Like so happy, like tears like streaming down, like, "Oh my god, my
Yeah,
dream!"
I fucking love it. Oh, it's so good. So you don't have two headphones in, but on this one, I'm sure you know, the
Yes.
textures that are going back and forth on there are just so trippy and evocative, and it just feels good.
Also, it feels very alive. It feels like this synthy thing in the background is like moving around and kind of living with you in the moment. It's so cleverly done. It's so simplistic. There's like
Yes.
what, two tracks making that sound, but it does everything. And then Dave's voice on top that's so like sultry. It's just like it's perfect.
Yeah, it's literally billowing out like smoke right
Yeah,
here. Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Smoke.
So what you said it was alive, and that reminded me of something that I was thinking about when you were talking about this world that they created, right? And like when you typically think of '80s music, you think of the programmed drum hits and the artificial tones and electronic stuff. And while they have that, you're right. It does feel organic in a way, like it doesn't feel sterile or lifeless or anything like that. There is like a breath to it, which again is also hard when you're making this out of like electronic instruments. And obviously, they have more than that, and like the vocals obviously give a lot of life to these songs. But even if you were just to listen to these songs without any vocals, I still think you would feel that aliveness in their music.
Absolutely, 100%. I think it comes down to the hardware that they're using to create this, because I'm quite sure that there's a lot of analog stuff going on here as well
Oh
as the
yeah.
digital. Because obviously that's the thing with the 80s, why it sometimes sounds, or quite sometimes, a lot of the pop music from the 80s, I think sounds amazing, but it also sounds a bit dated because it was right in that window where things were like between analog and digital, and it was kind of awkward, and it created like a super charming sound for a lot of the
Hmm.
music that I adore, but it still is, it kind of puts it in a specific time frame.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what Depeche Mode has managed to do is they kind of use some of those sounds, but they've also incorporated stuff that sounds so modern, which is obviously not something you could ever know that it would sound modern in 2025, but it
No.
definitely is like very timeless and very warm. Like it has, this album to me has a very like strong warmth to it,
Yes.
a warm summer night or something, in the
Yeah,
dark.
or even to kind of go back to what we were talking about, just the heat of the dance room club or like the dance floor or something
Yeah,
like that. Well,
yeah,
maybe
exactly.
like it's not like a summer album, but like even if it's cold outside, like it is where we're both at right now, when you're
Yes,
listening to this, you're inside to feel warm to block
yes,
all of that other stuff out. Another thing that you mentioned, we are talking about just staying in that pocket, right, and letting things develop, right? And I think that there's a tendency now, especially with our short attention spans, just like we need a new riff like every 5 seconds or need something new to keep everybody holding. But obviously in like, the music that you write in Doom and, a lot of metal, sometimes the genres are prone to longer songs and stuff like that, specifically for just like wanting to let those ideas develop. And also, I think trusting the listener to not tune out after a little bit to follow your songs and stuff like that. How do you approach that? Because I know obviously like a song like Fortapt, for example, is, 11 and a half minutes long. You have a lot of long songs on your previous albums and stuff like that as well. I'm sure, I mean, maybe you do, but I'm sure it's not like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write a 12-minute song. Like, let's go. I'm sure it kind of just like develops as it goes. But like, what is kind of your approach when you realize that songs are getting a little bit like longer, or you realize, no, we need to like sit here for 3 minutes before we go? And I'm very curious about like how you specifically kind of navigate, oh, hey, songs are starting to balloon a little bit. What do we do?
Well, I mean, I have to say that as a songwriter, I wish I could say that I had like all these. I didn't wish. I don't wish. I don't know. It is what it is. But I could, some people could maybe say that they have like a very technical approach to how to do things, or very like, aware approach, or like I meant to do exactly that, and that's
Sure.
why this is. For me, it's like it's so spontaneous and so emotionally driven that it
Mm,
will just very simply and non-fancily be, how long do I feel like this needs to be here before like the story needs to go on to a different path, or like it passes the torch to something that makes sense, that kind of thing.
yeah.
So those songs that get really long has a tendency, like for example, let's use For Top that you mentioned, from Nova, my fourth record. um, that song has kind of like it is kind of like part by part, and then that's the, for example, that end part after kind of drops down into nothing, and
Hmm.
it's the same riff actually from the moment it drops down into nothing until the very end, and that lasts for, I don't know, I don't even know how many minutes it is, three, four
Yeah, I
minutes
don't know either. It's like three or four or something like
Something like
that,
that.
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same riff for that. Like that, and there's like minor changes happening because, again, as a composer, I'm very inspired by the minimalist movement because I find it really fascinating. Oh, that's
Yeah,
a good
here we
one.
go. Let's go, Kathrine. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do. I think that this might be my favorite song off this record. Just like it's
it's
so.
hard.
I'm gonna be. I think I've. Yeah, I told you before. Just for the rest of the day, all I ever wanted. All I ever. I'm just gonna be dancing around like that. So good.
It's so. I mean, it's hard not to state this as a favorite because, again, it's so well written, and like
And the
the
little like,
guitar.
oh, the choir like
I
little
know
like.
the choir. That's, again, super synthetic, but somehow it doesn't feel sterile when it's put
Hmm.
in the context it's in. Super genius. The guitar part, you remember that? The vocal line, you remember that? It's just like, and the synth part that comes later, na 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 na. There's so many melodies. They're just like, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a perfect song. It's a perfect song.
It's the perfect song. So, anyways, gonna wrap up my thoughts about the songwriting. I'm gonna give you a little anecdote about the song afterwards,
Okay.
but. So as someone that's inspired by minimalism, as a composer, I really do find it fascinating taking something that's quite minimal and just like changing it slightly over time, which
Yeah.
makes it very annoying for especially my my live guitar player Florian to try to figure out how many rounds I played like that, and then there's this one little change, and then we flip that, and like but basically it's about like, I love this thing of putting the listener into trance and like trying to build and like grow slowly over time together into a peak, and like then it's like a release and you drop kind of thing.
Yes.
And it just, some songs are like that, they require that build, they require that to happen. So it's like my compositional process is very much emotionally driven. It's just like based on feeling. Does it feel right or does it feel wrong? So sometimes I have many different versions of a song, many different structures, just to try things, and then I will end up with the one that just feels like it tells the story the right way, basically.
I love that. I love that you said the songs tell a story, or like the lyric, because you like you can. And
Yeah.
as I'm gonna just like undulate over here, listen to bunking, bunking, it's so gorgeous. But also like that makes sense as a listener, and like going back, even like back through like Wistful and everything like that, just knowing that there's on feeling, because like that's kind of how it feels as a listener too. You just like, okay, where is the next thing gonna take me? I'm just kind of like, I get in the canoe and like let the river take me down wherever it is, right? That's the songwriting.
That's it. And I mean, I think it's also, as an artist, you're kind of, if no matter what it is, if it's music, if it's writing, photography, whatever, it's kind of our duty as people that can tap into that, since not everyone has the ability and or the want to tap into stuff like that.
Yeah.
But since we do, I feel it's like our job to honor that as well and try to kind of let that stream of consciousness speak through us. and sometimes not try to meddle with it too much. Like,
Mm.
trying to make it fit into a certain box or whatever. But just like always go back to, does it feel right? Does it feel like this is emotionally worthy compared to what I was trying to express, what I want to communicate to the listener? Does the story make sense the way I wanted to tell it? So
Mm.
that's what it should come down to, and it always comes down to for me, anyways.
Yeah, I love that, and I love asking different creatives because, like you said, there's no one, like everybody is different, and like some people, like yes, I hear the music in my head, I know what it's gonna do, and I'm like writing it out. But I just love hearing everybody's different takes on how they write, even within like same like or similar genres or sounds or whatever. It's always different.
Absolutely. That's something you learn quite quickly. Like I had a very like when I went into this, I had kind of in the beginning a kind of fixed idea how I thought it should work. And
Hmm.
as I've done this now, I've recorded 4 albums and 2 EPs at this point and many different guest vocals. So I'm still in the beginning. I'm not like, like, oh, I've, been doing this forever, but it's been 10 years of doing that. So that's
Yeah.
something. I have learned along the way that there are no truths, basically. It's going to look different every time. You might have some things you think will work in a certain way. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And in the end, it's just about going with the flow and making something you're proud of,
Mm.
ultimately.
What was the
So,
anecdote that you were gonna say
yeah,
on
I
this
was
one?
just going to
Yes.
say. So this was the first song that I think, this was the first cover song I ever recorded, actually.
Oh, okay.
Like I remember learning it first. I like was playing it on the piano because back in the day, like quite a long time ago, piano was my main instrument for composing.
Mm.
But I switched to guitar when I decided to start playing guitar in like 2013, I think it was. I
Hmm.
started playing guitar because it just felt like that translated better into band
Mm.
music than it did on the piano. Um, so this was the first cover I recorded, and it was like properly recorded. It was at the university when I was going there to get my bachelor's degree in musicology, and we had like this like cool studio and everything there. And that's actually part of that. That assignment was a part of getting me into the studio to record my first album.
Oh,
So thank you,
wow.
Depeche Mode, for like
Yeah, it's just
getting
like
me
a
on the.
full circle type of deal. Oh, that's so cool.
It's so cool because, long story short, at the university in Oslo, at that Institute for Musicology, there's a full functioning, beautiful studio with lots of cool
Mm.
equipment. But to get
Yeah.
in, you have to pass like a test, and you have to do like a course to get in there. And I kind of wanted to do that anyways, but then this assignment came up, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna record some stuff through my interface at home, like just kind of DIY. And I kind of want to do some stuff a little better, and it got me in towards that. And then that allowed me, after I
Wow.
started to get a little bit of experience with it, allowed me to start recording my album without knowing what the fuck I was doing, but still.
Yeah, but you did it right. I'd say I still have no idea what the fuck I'm doing, Catherine. Right? So just like
There we go.
we just do the thing. No, I love that. There's a private college here in Nashville called Belmont. They have something very similar where they have like a music recording track or something like that, and they have this. They call it the Quonset hut, which it looks like a small little airplane hangar that they have just close to Music Row. That the students, again, once they get to either a certain class or they test into it, a certain thing, can use it. And Patsy Cline recorded there. Basically, any type of country musician from like the 40s on has had recorded something there. And so it's really cool that the universities allow their like students and stuff like that to do that because now look what it had brought them.
Exactly.
They've unleashed Sylvaine upon the world.
Exactly. They didn't know that they were doing that, but like, it was cool that time. And yeah, I remember distinctly recording this cover, Enjoy the Silence, and being like, it kind of, I guess that also was a moment of, because I had recorded stuff before, but not like, what can I say, a production where there was like as much layering and as much different things. And I had never recorded guitar before. It was
Mm.
just for that. I just learned the little this thing on the guitar for that cover. And after that, like I don't know, it just kind of gave me this feeling of shit. Maybe I could actually do this on my own. And I didn't tell anyone that I was working on my first album because I was sure I was going to fail. But somehow, Enjoy the Silence had a little part in me being like, maybe I can do it. So
I
that's
love
also
that.
part of why I wanted to talk about this record, because it actually has meant quite a big deal to me in many ways, not just as a listener enjoying it, but like in my path. It's I'm kind of realizing it as I'm saying that actually it's like really important.
Yeah,
I should
it's
have been
that's
crazy.
that I'm so glad you did because that's basically exactly what I want when a guest chooses an album. And I have had a few people when they're like, oh, it is funny actually. The last person to be like, I can't choose between these two records, choose this one for me. We had a very similar conversation as far as, oh wow, I'm just realizing now how influential this record was as I go through, and like. Yeah, I love that, and that's why I wanted you to do that so that because I know that there are some people who have tried to. Oh, I thought about doing this one thing because it's like it's cool and it's fucked up and like I like it, but like eventually people just fall into the things that they really love and are comfortable at talking about. And I'm like, I loved hearing that some small way, a little spark of this is what kind of started you on your path to where we are right now.
Yeah, I know we wouldn't be here talking about it if it hadn't been for this record, actually.
Crazy,
Amazing
crazy.
thinking about it. Like
Up,
I
up
kept
the
reading
Depeche Modes. Let's go, everybody. Fuck yeah. But that actually, so something that you did say, one thing that I did want to know. So obviously, you went to school for musicology. You're a pianist, a keyboardist, a singer, a guitarist, a mamba player. I don't even know what else that you play. A dancer, an artist of like all sorts. I'm curious as far as what your projects were before, if any, before you really decided doing on Sylvain? Because like you did play in bands and play with people and stuff like that before, correct?
I did absolutely, yeah. It just was kind of like I mean, it's funny. I don't know. Like maybe it's because I grew up in a big city. I mean, like that's so funny to call Oslo a big city, but nevertheless, it's our capital. Even if we
Yeah,
have
well,
like seven.
and compared to some places in Norway too, it's very populous.
Yeah, there's like there's lives three people here. Yeah, there was a bit more than three people, but because it's a big city, I didn't necessarily have that experience of like going to school, like elementary school, and like finding the people that were doing music, and then like we
Yeah,
created a band, and we were in people's garage. It was just kind of more of a big mixed bag when I grew up, so I didn't really have that segue into music. I just kind of got into it through my parents. Like it was always there. It's been a constant in my life since I was born. I could
yeah,
dance before I could. I was dancing before I could walk. I've been told. So or dancing, like baby dance, whatever.
sure.
So I mean, it's been a thing of my life always, but I didn't get into it through that kind of like the what could I say, the cliche of like meeting people in high school and then getting into band and all that kind of stuff. When I started music high school, it was here in Norway. When you start high school, you kind of can go into like a major, you can decide which kind of direction you want to go, and you have something called music, dance, and drama, which is what I chose. So the first
Mm,
year you do all three actually, and then the second and third year, you kind of specialize in one of those three directions. And I went into music, of course, with singing as my main instrument, drums as my second instrument, and piano as my third instrument. Um, and that's when I started to kind of meet people, and we kind of made a bit more like, like I had my first band, my first group. So I also had like ensembles, like with singing, choirs. I also did things which was like just like an acoustic guitar player and me singing, stuff like that. Or I remember there was once I did like a band where I was playing bass, so it was like kind of later for me. Like it
yeah.
was from 16 and on that I started to do like communal project with other people.
Mm,
And I was in several bands up until like right until the moment where I really started to kind of focus on Sylvain, but
mm,
nothing that ever had like kind of any ambition to really go anywhere.
yeah,
It's not a problem at all. It's just like, it was more like a hobby thing. And I kind of knew already in high school that this is what I want to do with my life, even if I had no confidence that I could be able to do it. But I was like, I still want to do it. Um, so at some point, I was just like, okay, I'm in these projects. We're doing all this stuff. It sounds cool. It feels fun. And I always like the kind of community you get in a band and everything. But I was like, I just feel like it's not a place for my innermost emotions and my
mm,
kind of like, in Sylvain's case, this spiritual quest that this has brought me on. It
yeah,
felt kind of weird to try to communicate that through others that might not be anywhere near on the same page. It felt like imposing something on some other people. So I was like, I think it's a sign that I need to actually start doing something on my own. So, I mean, I'd been writing songs since I was like 16, 15, 16, whatever. So it's been like, something that I've been doing for most of my life,
yeah,
actually. But I never really found a home for them. Like, I tried in several different groups, I had like several different bands, but nothing where I felt like my most personal stuff really found a home. So that's when Sylvain kind of came up during my university years, and I was like, wait a second, now I actually have the space for this, and I feel
yeah.
like I'm ready to really fully explore it, not just kind of like, oh, I'm writing songs, but I'm not really doing much with them, or like trying to play them in bands where it just didn't sound right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did have quite a bit of stuff that going on before Sylvain, but nothing that's really nothing that felt right in terms of using this kind of music to to play in the bands or the things. So that's why Sylvain.
I love how even when, you didn't have confidence, you still had that confidence to go and do your stuff on your own. And even if you weren't sure of yourself, you're still putting the music out there and getting it through. I don't know. I think that's one of those things, some people are just like meant to do what they're meant to do, right? And I think that you trying to push through even when you're like unsure of yourself, to get here now to release music internationally and tour across the world and everything like that. It's just like so fucking cool. And I'm so glad that, I'm glad that people can, have kind of that story to look on and be like, no, just do what you want to do if you have an idea on it. Yeah, no, it's just cool to see that even when you were in your fledgling musician days and
Yeah,
just, playing with people knowing, no, I need to do something on my own and I'm going to do something on my own, to the point that, you didn't tell anybody that you were working on your first album and stuff like that. It's
exactly.
it's incredible, but I'm glad that you were able to do that so that we can sit here and talk today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm very glad for that too. And I just feel like sometimes it's like you don't really choose. Life kind of, or something, some kind of force chooses you to speak through you, and you just kind of have to like surrender and be like, okay, let's try
Mm.
this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I feel with music is that it's something that's kind of like a higher thing, whatever, that's channeled through me, and I feel like it's because it's chosen me. I have to like honor it and try to make the most of it, and never really, like settle or like what can I say, like never never be in it for the wrong reasons, or like never
Yeah.
like release records just to release records, but to always uphold like this emotional worthiness that I always have when I release. Or I will never release a record just because it's been so and so many years since the last one. I will always release stuff when I feel like this is something I need to say. This is a picture of who I was in the moment I created it, and it needs to be out, not out in the world, but it needs to be projected somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's kind of crazy to think back at those moments now, and I just remember like I remember my mom was always the one who was like, "You're gonna end up having a solo project," and I was like, "No, I want to be in a band. Like I like rock music and like metal stuff, and like I don't want to be a solo singer songwriter type." And she was right. She knows me so
The
well. She
moms
was like, "No,
moms always
I can
know,
do it."
don't they?
Yeah, they do. They do. She was like, "Just wait and see," and I was like, "Okay, well, we'll see."
Yeah.
Yeah, she was right, and I'm glad that my parents actually pushed me a lot. They were the ones. They were part of like pushing
That's
me
so
into.
great. Yeah, because not a lot of people have that, or
No,
not. I should say not a
no
lot of people. I
way.
should say not everybody has that. So it's always
Everyone.
great to be supported. I mean, my parents have been the same way as far as like, hey, do whatever you want to do, just to
Yeah.
make you happy or whatever it is, right? Um, but yeah, yeah, it's so good that you have that support system because that matters so much.
I feel very blessed for that. Like they were the ones that were like, "Hey, if you want to do something, you have to go out and do it." Like
Yeah,
we believe in you. Like, just why don't you believe in yourself? Like they would fight me, with my bad self-conscious thing, and they were just like, "Why? Like you have the talent, just do
yeah,
it. Like just
yeah.
tell your stories." And I was like, "I don't know, man." So no, I'm very lucky that I had that from a young age, and they've always been super supportive. So that's also why I wanted to make my first album with my dad on drums, because I know that when he, at some point, hopefully not before like at least 200 years, is no longer with me, I can always look back on that and be like, we made this together, and
Yeah.
it means everything to me. It was like the biggest change in my life, and I wanted the people that I love the most to be a part of it in which way they could. So it was really important to have my dad on drums for that first record, and just really happy that a 70-something-year-old jazz kind of drummer said that, yeah, let's do some blast beats.
Yeah. You can
That
always
was
learn
cool.
something new, right? Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah, I love that. It's been so great hearing all these stories and talking to you through this, getting to like a little piece of your world over here. Cause I mean, you're right. I mean, obviously, authenticity and being genuine in music, I think is one of the reasons why us, our music files, whoever are drawn to these type of bands, right, is because there's so much, vulnerability and, genuine emotion and stuff like that in them. And when even just like hearing you talk about your music, let alone playing it, you can hear and see that passion that you have for your project and your music. And kind of getting back to what I said earlier about just being able to go and do a folk EP just because you wanted to, and like your fans know, hey, this is just a thing that I'm going to do, and then I'll get back to the screaming at some point later, but also that they not only like, oh yeah, they tolerate it, but they cherish it and they want you to do that and everything like that.
Yeah, I was actually quite scared when I released that EP as to how my fans would react to the music, because it stripped down all of the kind of duality aspect of my music that I also, as a listener, very much enjoy, like this kind of like putting the harsh up against the soft and the ugly up against the beautiful, or yeah, serene, pretty, whatever. But it was just like something I've been wanting to do for many years, and I felt like, okay, if this has been calling at me for so long,
Mm-hmm.
this seems to be the moment. And I had been performing one of the title track of the record, Er Framand. I've been performing that live, and the fascinating thing about that is I've been performing it live in like kind of all around the world. I did it like in the last show with Zeal and Ardor. I did that, I remember, in San Francisco, Berkeley technically, but San Francisco-ish Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter where I performed it, no matter what country it was, like nobody understood what the fuck I was saying. Of course, like even Norwegians have a hard time because it's like a really old-timey, weird dialect thing going on there. But everyone always reacts the same. It's like everyone gets quiet and they actually listen, and they just like get taken by the melodies, and many people cry and get emotional. I'm just like, this song is so incredibly special. Like it that's what it did to me. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, what? Wait, what? Excuse me, what just happened? It hit me like a ton of bricks in the best possible way. And I'm like, I have to sing it. Like it's calling my name. I need to sing it. And when the question came up of should I actually eternalize it, because I kind of liked it being something ephemeral that kind of just came out every now and then. I never practiced the song. I always just sing it in the moment because I don't want to get used to it, because it has this like magical touch that I don't want to mess with,
Yeah.
But I decided that if I can record it in a way that's worthy, in a space that's worthy, then I can do it. And that's why I decided to make it the centerpiece of an EP. So the idea kind of escalated and grew, and I recorded it in a church, and I kind of like learned how to play very, very, very basic organ to bring this EP to life, and kept it very organic. Like it's very like the concept was very much like there's no rhythm, there's no like 10,000 takes of the same voice, like there's a one-shot thing more or less, and trying to keep it very organic and authentic, and keeping the reverb of the church as the main kind of color of the sound. So that EP was very much an experiment, but it was so refreshing. I needed that so much at that time. Like it was so inspiring from start to finish. It was like what, 6 months or something? It was like very short period of time. Making the music, writing it, recording it on my own, like in various different locations, mainly the church, and then having it mixed and mastered and doing the artwork. It was just such a breath of fresh air. Like Nova, my fourth record, was such a painful process. It was like,
I believe it.
I'm so proud of the record and I'm so happy with it now, but it was an ordeal from start to finish. It was an ordeal. Sometimes that's what you have to go through to create the most amazing things, right? But Er Framand was like a pleasure to make, and I'm really proud of this EP actually, and very, very grateful that my fans embraced it like that, because I was a bit scared. I was like, are they going to get on board with this? But I have yet to see anyone be like, oh, this sucks. So, I haven't looked hard enough, maybe, but it was a risk to take, but people were like, we trust you. We'll come on your journey and go into other parts that we didn't really expect. So it's a privilege.
Yeah, and it's so huge, and like I said, I'm just so glad that you got to be able to do that and just feed that creative soul a little bit. Because do you think that it kind of opened you up a little bit more to put you in a better space for the writing the next record?
Absolutely, I can already feel that basically like thoughts and feelings and everything from the EP is affecting me in my approach to the fifth album. So it's not, obviously it's kind of going back a bit more into the Sylvaine sound that people kind of know. I mean, people know my music
Sure.
already. But for example, this approach of like not trying to overproduce it too much, or like to try to keep some of the errors or the imperfections, because it really makes it more human. It makes it more approachable somehow. And also the fact of recording in specific places. I also have a track on this next record that is totally ambient. There's no rhythm or anything. It's just basically totally based on feeling when I'm playing it. So I mean, yes, it has definitely bled over into the next record, and I think it's interesting because when you're at album number 5, as we spoke about with Violator, album number 7,
Mm,
it's about trying to, because you always want to reinvent yourself somewhat.
yeah,
If it's not like a complete different thing like I did with the EP, still you want to kind of push the bar and you want to challenge yourself to grow as you're releasing new things.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
it was a needed step. Like, I think if I was to go directly from Nova into the 5th album, I would first and foremost be extremely intimidated by Nova because I am really proud of this album, and I'm kind of like, how am I going to top that? Because it was such an intense part of my life that it reflected, and I haven't lived something as intense since then yet. So I'm just like, can I even do that? Like, I'm really, I don't know. But then, the other side of my brain is like, you really shouldn't be overthinking this. It's about, like, again, like trying to like let inspiration flow through, and what needs to come out will come out. And it's, to say it's better or worse, it doesn't matter. It has to be like, the right thing for that time.
Yes.
But having the EP in between, it kind of refreshed things a bit. So I got back into it with a different mindset, which I think has definitely helped in the creation of the 5th record so far.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I kind of figured that it would, just kind of like releasing that creative thing, and like you said, getting out of your head and not thinking anymore. But yeah, you're right. The fact that you're challenging yourself, and again, just like when you did your first album, scared to do it, not knowing if it's going to work and not knowing how it's going to be received or if you can even do it, but yet still going ahead and doing it
Yes.
anyway. Because like, think of what would happen if you didn't do it, right? It wouldn't, things wouldn't be the same. And that's what I always think too, is just like, hey, I could either think about this thing all the time, or I could just like try and do it, and then it fails and it sucks and whatever. At least you did it, and you don't have to think about it anymore.
That's it. I think it's like when you think about stuff in life, what you regret are the things you didn't try, not the things that you tried and that they didn't go as the way you would have hoped or the way you planned. It's the stuff that you kind of have to play the what if game with. That's the stuff that eats away at you. And I was just like, I knew that from a very early age. I started saving up like funds to be able to live the way that I've been doing until like it kind of got off the ground from I was around 14 or something like that. Because I was like, I know that I want to do this. I just have to figure out how I'm going to do it and in which shape it will, take form. But if I don't do this, I think I will become a very sad person. And I'd rather try this and not like, I don't know, I have zero clue how it's going to work.
Yeah.
I still sit here 10 years later after this project started and go, I can't believe that people are listening to my music all over the world. Like, that's boggles my mind.
Sure.
But I didn't know back then like how it was going to go, but I still had no choice. I was like, I need to do it, because if I don't, I will regret it for the rest of my life. So yeah, there's something to be said for just like trying.
Yeah.
If it doesn't go the way you planned, then at least you tried. You have to try stuff.
Exactly. Just fucking try it and see what
Exactly.
happens. You just fucking try it and see what happens.
Exactly.
Well, Kathrine, we just kind of
Yeah, I
blazed
know.
through those last couple of songs, which I didn't want to interrupt you because, but like Blue Dress might be my last favorite song on that record, which is just like the horniest, sexiest, most seductive song on that whole album. It's just so good.
It is really good. It's really, and also, by the way, I also forgot to mention, but did you notice that like I think it's Enjoy the Silence, and I wonder, is it Blue Dress or is it Policy of Truth or is it Clean? I can't remember. There's like hidden tracks on some of those where like the song will end and then there's like a moment of silence, literally Enjoy the Silence.
Yeah.
And then there's just like a weird ambient thing that just kind of starts creeping in, and then they end the track.
Yeah, I did notice that. It's interesting. So, like I said, I got the lyrics up on Genius. On Spotify, it has them as one track, but on Genius, it actually says, it says Enjoy the Silence, and then interlude number 2, Crucified, and then after Blue Dress, interlude number 3. So yeah, they did put those in there, but I didn't see on the track listing or anything like that on any
On
of the
the
streaming
record, it's not
platforms.
listed.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything, but
listed.
I did notice that because at first, was Enjoy the Silence went out, and I was like, oh, I thought this song was a little bit longer, like, and then the interlude popped up and came in. But yeah, I have a couple of follow-up or like 2 related follow-up questions to end. But before I get there, last thoughts listening to Violator again, Kathrine. I know we've gushed about it ad nauseum, but getting through it one more time, thoughts.
For me, it's one of those masterpiece records. Like I think this word is kind of weird when you talk about art, because art is inevitably a very subjective thing. It's not something that fits into a box. And I always found like reviewing music a bit weird because of that. Because I mean, it's very relevant to the person that's writing the review, and perhaps also they're following because they have the same kind of feelings as the person that they're following, because that's why they follow them. But in general, it's such a subjective thing. But I think, objectively speaking, Violator is an absolutely banging record. Like, it
Hmm.
has so many good things about it. I mean, like, the performances are wonderful. Like, they're really good. The songwriting, like, just on a skill level, is really masterful. The sound production, as I said before, is really, really good. The as you said, the order of the song, like the story it tells and the journey it takes you on, it's super cleverly laid out, and how like the different songs hit at different points. And clean, by the way, the last song on that record as well, that's a bit more avant-garde, a bit more experimental. I think
Yeah.
I read they were someone was slightly inspired by Pink Floyd for that. It's just so, it makes you like, it's kind of like almost like a cliffhanger. It kind of makes like, what is next after this? Like, you give us this record that's absolutely incredible, and then you end on this note, which is like very, I don't know, it's a, I just think it's an amazing record. I really love it. I'm listening to it again today. I'm just like, I should listen to this record every day. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, the day is still young for me, so I still might give it a spin a little bit. But exactly what you were saying, that hearing it was inspired maybe by Pink Floyd, makes a lot of sense, because it just like
Yeah,
leaves
I
you
think
kind of like you almost need a little bit of time to process everything that you just heard, and it
that's
gives
it.
you that time to do that. But it's also kind of like the end question mark, what?
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's it. And I was listening to this on Spotify. That's another discussion, Spotify, how good that is, but whatever, it is what it is.
right.
Um, Basically, and I'm listening to the deluxe version, which is something that like they remastered. I don't know if it's remastered, but they re-released it later. And there's a whole bunch of new songs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different new tracks after that clean track. So it definitely makes sense that it feels like it's not really the ending. It's like one of those, again, like a cliffhanger in like a movie or a show or whatever. You're just like, this is not it, is it?
Mm-mm.
So it's really interesting, and the fact that they have like really poppy, very accessible stuff mixed in with sounds, and mixed in with melodies and things that are really not mainstream at all. It's just such a really interesting and genius mixture. And just, if people out there haven't listened to Violator, what are you doing? Go listen
Yeah,
to it.
get it in your ears, everybody. Especially because exactly, and I think this is why Depeche Mode appeals to so many people across genre lines, whether it's heavy music or rock music or any type of music, right? Indie music or anything like that, pop music, because uh, of just all of the different areas that they cover. And if you're someone who's traditionally like, oh, I mostly like my heavy music, or I like my like badass music, or this or that, and maybe you are turned off by the bright, shimmery, poppy electronic noises of that, give Violator a try, because behind that veneer of shimmering electronics, there's so much darkness and
That's
sinister
it.
stuff to it, that if you like your Emperor and your Immortal, you will find
Yes.
something dark to listen to on this.
Absolutely. It's so heavy in its own right. It's so heavy. It's so dark. It's so nocturnal. It has, I mean, yeah, it's just really, just go listen to the record. Just
Yeah.
listen to it. Please listen to
You heard it from Kathrine Shepard, everybody. Listen to the fucking record.
it. Exactly. Please. Like,
Please do. So Catherine, to wrap up, so this is like a sort of two-parter, but amalgamation of two questions in one that makes sense to each other, because we talked about your show coming up in a couple of days in Belgium with Jo Quail, and we also talked about you stripping back your sounds, which also got back into. We talked about a lot of shit in this conversation, but we also talked about vulnerability and stuff like that, and your music, especially talking about the authenticity and stuff like that, you are very much a I'm going to bare my soul in my music type of deal, so that you can see exactly what I'm thinking and what is in my heart and what's in my soul, so that you can know where I'm coming from, which is why I think people gravitate towards your music. I think that it would be a lie to say that there isn't vulnerability or like emotions or anything like that in heavy music, right? But I think that there is a type of vulnerability that so many more women playing in extreme music and playing heavier music and stuff like that, there is a type of vulnerability that heavy and extreme music hasn't traditionally seen, because it's been historically dominated by men and stuff like that. Do you think that that is something that heavy music is seeing a little bit more of, like people trying to be a little bit more vulnerable because of whatever reason. And I guess is that kind of something that you think about when trying to strip your songs back and play them? Because, like you said, he feels like you're naked on stage when you're playing these arrangements. Yeah, I was just curious about how you inject your vulnerability and historically what you've seen in the music that you listened to before creating Sylvaine.
I think definitely there is something to be said for the whole like masculine versus feminine, and especially I think it's very prevalent in heavy music because, as you said, up until like the last few decades, it was very heavily male dominated.
Hmm.
Um, so and also, like the traditional gender roles have maybe been upheld a bit more up until more recent times,
Yeah.
and it's kind of become I think it's also evolving in time with society. Also this whole thing about like, for example, mental health and all this kind of stuff that vulnerability could be linked to and emotional could be linked to.
Sure.
That it's okay to be more open these days, and it's more like awareness around that, and the fact that guys for a long time also have been. We always talk about the gender roles that affect women negatively, which we absolutely should, but we
Hmm.
also have to talk about what men have been going through. And one of those things have, for example, been like, oh, like boys don't cry, the
Hmm.
cure,
You're right.
um, which is not obviously not the case at all. Even though, let's be honest, there are certain differences between female and male, like not everyone, of course, but we see like tendencies. But I think it's becoming more and more open for that. No matter gender or whatever expression you want to do, it's open for that. And
Yeah.
I think definitely bands like you mentioned, Yob, or for example, 40 Watt Sun in this case, several others that are, or like the whole Doom scene, My Dying Bride, a lot of these kind of bands
Yeah,
that actually
Woods
brought
of
like
Ypres or something
sentiment.
like that, right? Yeah, doom
Yeah,
metal I think is definitely something that vulnerability lends itself to. I think just because of the
absolutely.
sadness of the music, right?
I mean, art is in general it's a reflection of the society we live in, right? And the people that
Hmm.
are creating it are a product of the environment that they're in. So I think it's only natural to see that as society opens up for many different things, like if it's gender, if it's sexuality, if it's mental health, if it's whatever, basically, like class differences, all kinds of stuff that have been like kind of taboo to speak about or difficult subjects to talk about before, now are more open. Of course, I think we're going to see this in art as well. And I think another product of that you can see is basically how genres are mixing, because it feels like, just going straight thrash, for example, or just like I'm a straight pop artist or whatever, it just doesn't feel like as natural anymore because
Right.
society is blending so in like every single way. It's such a mishmash and like a mixture of thing, such a mixed bag that it feels kind of weird to just kind of like limit yourself like that as a creative at this point in time. So I think that also goes for the kind of like more sensitive expression. Is that I think a lot of people are feel more safe, I would say, to be able to open up in a way that
Mm.
maybe hasn't felt as available before, because a lot of other also, I mean, it's also because a lot of other people have gone forward with an example and show that this is actually a doable thing. Like I was just talking to someone yesterday about that, how like I was thinking about my set list for the show with Jo Quail and various other amazing artists this Saturday in Antwerp in Belgium, and how my first amplified solo show was in the same venue I'm going to play on Saturday.
Really? Oh, wow, there's just like
Yeah.
all these full circle
I know,
moments
it's full
happening,
circle moments. It means I'm getting fucking old.
Yeah.
But except for that aside, I mean, that's a privilege too, right? Um, I just realized that like that when I did that show back then, I was so scared because it was like one of the first shows I did where I brought this part of my project to life. And I did that, and then like later in the weekend, I played with Emma Ruthrundle, and I did a warm up like show for her in Paris. But anyways, I played this cathedral in Antwerp that I'm going to play on Saturday, and I remember the last song of that set is the last song on my third album. Is called L'Appel de Vide, which translates into something along the lines of the call of the void.
Mm.
And on each record I have, that's a concept I have through all my albums. I have a word or like a saying like this that can't be translated with one word into English. So this one from French, it basically translates into that feeling of when you're standing on a cliff and you just kind of wonder, what would it feel like if I jumped? And it's not suicidal. Many people have asked me about this before. It's not a suicidal song. That's not
Yeah.
the idea here. It's just that like it's a metaphor for how humans tend to be attracted to things that are bad for them, or feel like comforted by darkness, or like will stay in depression because you know what that feels like, rather than trying to bring yourself out because that's scary. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
The comfort of darkness that we can feel in our human situation. And I played that song and I just completely lost it at the end of that set. I just like broke down, bawling my eyes out.
This is on
And I
stage
was talking on
or like
stage.
okay, yeah.
Oh, on stage.
Hmm.
And I mean, now looking back at it, this is nothing new. I'm known for this at this point, which is like, it is what it is, you know. I think it's just like not trying to put up any like protection, but just kind of like
Yeah.
releasing everything. And it's also
Yeah.
like a very cathartic process. And I think there's a beauty in that, and also kind of like a strength in that, being
A
able to be
hundred
like,
percent.
no, this is what this music does to me. And it makes me feel, and I really hope it makes you feel too. It doesn't have to make you feel the same thing as me, but this means so much to me that I'm overwhelmed. So I'm playing the same song on Saturday at the end, and I was talking to this person. He was like, "I hope you'll keep it together like this time." And then he was like, "No, actually, I think it's, jokes aside, I think it's the perfect way to end a set. Like if that's the emotions that are here at the time, then there is no need to filter that out,
Hmm.
because there's nothing more honest than being like, just in a non-verbal way, say that this means the world to me, and it makes me feel everything that I felt like from the moment that I wrote this song that many years ago, and still now it feels so present in me that I just can't keep it together." And I think when people do that on stage, I have several other friends that I know, like for example, Emma is a good example of a person. Patrick too from 40 Watt Sun is also known for doing that. Um, it just shows that it's not a weakness.
Mm-mm.
And that's something that has been in society for a long time, that like public display, if it's through music or if it's like, you know, you actually literally break down crying somewhere in public, it's like a weakness. And I so think it's the opposite. I think it's a strength
Mm.
to be able to be like, this is me, this is how I feel, and there's no shame in it.
Yeah. Did you? That was a beautiful answer to this long-winded question I had, which gets into Saturday and everything like that. Which we are in the little bit of time that will only exist for a small fraction of the world spinning where you are before this event. After everybody hears this, and for the rest of your life, it'll be after this event and everything like that. But yeah, I am interested in hearing about your idea of like stripping these songs back to present them to people, because I'm sure for some of the, obviously, like I said, it makes sense for the arrangements, but I'm sure it probably wasn't maybe as easy as oh yeah, I'm just gonna take these and make an acoustic version out of all these songs.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, it's always like, especially when you deal with like layers in music, it's always kind of like kill your darlings, like who is important enough to make the cut.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I have when I do these amplified solo shows. That's why I don't usually say acoustic, because I always fear that people will be disappointed when I show up with my electric
I
semi
gotcha.
hollow
Yeah.
guitar and backtracks, or some tracks that I recorded previously recorded. Um, I do have some stuff like with me that are from the original recordings of the songs,
Oh, cool.
and then some other songs I have completely like reworked, or like I'll do something totally different. And I also have like some, like this time I think there's 3 different set lists I can choose from, and I'll just like go on the fly, like I'll just decide on the fly,
Hell
like
yeah.
like I've been I was so afraid of doing that just like literally 2 years ago, and now like since 2023 I've been very much like, I remember just for example with 40 Watt Sun, a song from that record that I mentioned, the Inside Room, Restless. That I remember just like at this Italian show, at the end of one of those shows, my band left the stage, I was left at the end, and I was just like, yeah, I just want to play this for you. Hadn't rehearsed it or anything. Or sometimes I ask the audience, do you want to hear a cover or do you want to hear one of mine? And they will like decide for me. So yeah, I have these 3 sets that I want to, depending on how I feel that day, I will do. But the stripped down versions are, I mean, you definitely recognizable. It's not like you'll be like, what song is that? I don't
Sure.
think, anyways. Some of them, I mean, the ones from the EP are pretty close. I mean, they are actually 100% what they are on the EP, the ones that I'm going to be playing. And it ranges from like singing Er Framand, which is completely a cappella, just me, my voice, and I, and then to like a finger picked song with voice, to like a song that has like maybe a couple of harmonies in on the backtracks, to a song that has like more full blown stuff in certain moments of the song. So it's like it is quite a dynamic journey, and I quite
Mm.
like that. Like again, it's like playing with the dualities between things.
Yeah.
Um, so what would make me happy, like be able to say that I'm happy after this is done? I mean, it's the same every time actually, that I just want people to go away from this show having felt something. Like I want to take them on a little journey. I want to give them a little break from their everyday life and like do something that's like not mundane. I want to shake them a bit emotionally. You know, I want to make them feel something. It doesn't matter if it's what emotion, but just. And I also kind of want to make people feel seen. That's what I really like with my music. As you said,
Mm,
this kind of, I feel this way, and if someone can be like, "Hey, I kind of feel that way too," that's just the most beautiful thing ever. Like it makes
yeah.
people feel less alone in this world. And as a person that has identified with loneliness for all of my life, like
Yes.
I've always,
Same.
even now, I can be, I can say I have friends all over the world, and still I have like some of the loneliest moments ever. And I also have throughout my life had those moments when you're like in a room full of people and you're just like, "Fuck, I'm so alone."
Yeah.
So being able to make people feel seen is also really, really a strong thing. And lastly, there are a few individuals that are going to be there on Saturday that mean extra much to me.
Mm.
And it's always special to play shows for people you love. And I think if I can make them feel, that obviously means just maybe a little extra. And which it sounds terrible because it doesn't matter who you are. I still cherish making people feel. But yeah, if you can make the people you love and that are closest to you and that you really care about feel seen and make them, yeah, give them a little break from everyday life, I think that is probably the ultimate thing. So that's what I hope I can do on Saturday. Make them proud,
Wow.
kind of.
Yeah. Kathrine, it's been amazing talking to you. I think that we should leave it there because I don't think either of us are going to follow up what you just said with anything better than that.
It's
uh,
been
It has
amazing.
been, yeah, it has been lovely speaking with you. Thank you so much for, sitting down with me to listen to Depeche Mode and dance and be sad and, all of that other stuff. Good luck on Saturday. I know, like, Jo Quail is amazing. Darker is amazing. You're amazing. Whoever is going to be watching that show and in that church is going to have an absolute amazing time. And then when you get over here in the States in February, I hope you and Ivor have an amazing time and you do the same thing, making people cry and weep and laugh and bawl and all that other stuff across the United States.
Thank you so much, John. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you. And again, keeping things short has never been my strong side, so I'm sorry about that.
No, look, I am a yapper from the time I wake up to the time I go down. Most of the time, in this setting, I am in actual public. People are like, "Man, you don't fucking talk at all. What the fuck is going on?" It's like, well, I'm in my comfy, like, happy space right
That's
now, right?
it.
Like the cozy, yeah. But no, absolutely. I could honestly, we could listen to 40 Watt Sun after this. I got nothing else going on.
Let's keep going.
Let's go. No, but maybe we could do that in the future. But good luck. I can't wait until I can get my ears on the new record, whenever it is, whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now. Hopefully not 5 years from now, but sooner rather than later. And yeah, I can't wait to see you and your live band, or just you, play live again.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you again for having me. It's been great talking about life with you, basically, and
Absolutely.
music. So thank you very much.
A few days after that show in Belgium with Jo Quail, Kathrine on her Instagram posted that the show was just, quote, so perfect in every possible way. And while I was producing this episode, I reached out to Kathrine to try and get her to condense her thoughts about the North American tour that concluded at the end of February that she was gearing up to get on to as we were discussing this episode. She said, quote, being back on stages in North America was a true privilege, even more so in the most wonderful of company with Ivor and her best crew. It was a challenging run in the sense that we were constantly faced with obstacles to overcome, including snowstorms, a busted trailer, and me coming down with the flu the day before our first show. But every single night, the shows were fantastic thanks to the warm embrace of the North American audience. I'm very grateful to have had the chance to come over with my solo set and extremely happy and humbled by how well it was received. Hope to be back again sometime in the future." End quote. And those of us on the continent will be happy to welcome you with open arms. Huge thanks to Kathrine Shepard for taking the time to sit down and share Depeche Mode's Violator with us, for being such an amazing guest to interview with her honesty, her introspection, and her thoroughness, and for just being a lovely and warm person in general. I really hope that we get to do this again at some point, that it is not your last time on Spinning the Wax. If you haven't already, give Sylvaine's 2024 EP, Er Framand, a spin, preferably with your best pair of headphones, laying down somewhere in nature and about 15 miles away from the nearest human being. And while you're at it, give Nova a spin, Sylvaine's absolutely incredible fourth album. It will transport you to realms unreachable through normal means, and it'll get you psyched for whatever else is next to come. No matter what or when it is, Kathrine, I know it's going to be incredible because it will have your fingerprints and your magic ingrained on all of the notes. Hey, thank you so much for checking out this episode of Spinning the Wax. If you enjoyed it, if you liked it, please give us a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Music, and share this with a friend who loves Depeche Mode, who loves Sylvaine, or who just loves any kind of heavy music in general. Also consider becoming a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/spinningthewax, where you can get early access to these episodes, new music updates every single week, access to my meticulously curated playlists, as well as versions of this episode that have the album listen portion in full. You can sync the music along with us, should you choose. You can follow us on Instagram at spinningthewax. You can follow me at staypuft_Malo. Let me know your thoughts on this episode, the music, or anything else that we talked about by shooting me a line at spinningthewax@gmail.com, or just getting the conversation started in the comments below. Next episode, I'm joined by Kyle Walburn and Brandon Iacovella of Atlanta progressive black metal band Tomaroom, and as they get ready to release a new album, we sit down to spin Eld on one of the early enslaved albums in their massive and impressive discography. It's really fucking good. And yeah, lots of talks about Vikings, fjords, elves, and a lot of wishing for Tomaroom and Enslaved to play together one of these days, which I want. I'm sure that you want as well. You don't want to miss that episode. It'll be out in 2 weeks at the usual places. So stick around and fucking find out. Until next time, everybody, we will see you. Stay safe, stay sane, stay heavy, stay puffed.